stranded cars and even flooded homes. Those are just some of the problems caused by last night's heavy rains in southern New Mexico.
It's a quick snapshot of Roswell's stormy weather. The most rainfall the city has seen in more than 60 years.
This is one last night, just east of us. This was that was a picture every second.
Daniel Fuller caught part of the storm on his GoPro.
I've lived here about 20 years, and I have never seen flooding like this before.
And this photo shows more flooding in Roswell. The water is up to the doors of those cars.
How long have you all lived here?
Oh, 12 years.
Have you ever seen flooding like this?
Not like this, no.
Southeast Texas is at risk for more flooding this morning after violent storms killed at least one person. Thunderstorms unleashed heavy hail in San Antonio Tuesday. Cars took a beating.
In Houston, a second straight day of drenching rain flooded the downtown area. Winds hit 60 miles an hour. Floodwaters are creating unusual dangers.
The rain pounded St. James Parish for quite some time today, too, causing widespread flooding there.
Caskets from the cemetery on Belrose Lane floating away from their resting places.
The rain started before dawn. Severe storms that dumped a deluge on St. James Parish. Drainage ditches overflowed, streets flooded. But the bigger story is that over 60 homes and businesses have been flooded. There was so much rain it quickly overwhelmed the drainage system. Parish residents, sheriff's deputies, even the parish president all said the same thing. They've never seen anything like this.
From the Dakotas all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, they are cleaning up after a round of severe weather, tornadoes, hail, and it comes just as we all now brace for something else. The beginning of hurricane
heard of the vortex in New York, right before that weird weather, the incredible heat that Australia has suffered, the floods in the UK, and you name it, and goes on and on and on and on. Frankly, there's no country that has been exempted from very strange weather over the past, let's say, 1 or 2 years. And these very strange extreme weather events are going to continue both in their frequency and in their severity. It's not that climate change is going to be here in the future. We are experiencing climate change, and we are already faced with severe impacts both on the economy as well as on human beings, and we can no longer afford not to take very, very clear action.
Around the world, activists are rallying for action on climate change. Tens of thousands filled the streets of cities like Melbourne, Rio de Janeiro, Berlin and Paris. Among those marching are celebrities plus world leaders. In New York, climate protesters plan to flood Wall Street on Monday, a day before the UN summit on climate change. Well, Alison Kosick is in New York with the details.
And hours into it, Andrew, marchers are still going strong. At the height of this march, thousands were lining the streets here of Midtown Manhattan. Why? They're trying to shine a light on the need to cut down on fossil fuels around the world. Now, the timing of this is significant. This week begins the UN General Assembly Council meeting here in New York City. Also, coincidentally enough, some top meteorologists last week said that this summer was the hottest on record for the globe. So that information fueling the cause for these folks in getting a handle on carbon emissions. The hope is that marches like this help the issue of climate change gain momentum. Marchers also included Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Al Gore, and celebrities.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I'm honored to be here today. I stand before you not as an expert, but as a concerned citizen. One of the 400,000 people who marched in the streets of New York on Sunday, and the billions of others around the world who want to solve our climate crisis. As an actor, I pretend for a living. I play fictitious characters, often solving fictitious problems. I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, as if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now. Every week we're seeing new and undeniable climate events, evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now. Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor. We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections. None of this is rhetoric, and none of it is hysteria. It is fact. The scientific community knows it, industry knows it, governments know it, even the United States military knows it. The chief of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Command, Admiral Samuel Locklear, recently said that climate change is our single greatest security threat. My friends, this body, perhaps more than any other gathering in human history, now faces this difficult but achievable task. You can make history, or you will be vilified by it.
One day, we will wake up to find that the energy that powers the alarm clock came from the breeze through the trees the night before. And we will go to work that morning riding the rays of the sun. It will light our cities and power our businesses. It will warm our homes and cool our workplaces. It will reduce sources of conflict and fuel our economies. It will connect us all. It won't scar the land or poison the seas. The food we eat will be good for our bodies and good for the planet. And the weather that day won't make us worry for tomorrow. There will be more jobs and less disease. The sea level will stop rising. And species will stop dying. The question is, how do we get to that day from where we are today? All 7.3 billion of us. We start by deciding that beyond our doubts and differences, such a day truly exists. And that is something each of us can do today. We can make today the day we stop thinking that the changes required to get there are impossible and beyond us, and start realizing that they are not only possible, but what the future requires of us. We must stop turning from the warnings of science and fear and denial, and instead turn toward the solutions and partnerships we need. We can make today the day we stop pointing at each other in blame, and instead chart a new course together. We have never faced a crisis this big, but we have never had a better opportunity to solve it. We have everything we need to wake up to a different kind of world. We need our leaders to be brave and their choices to be bold. They will either remember us as the generation that destroyed its home, or the one that finally came to respect it. We have every reason in the world to act. We can't wait until tomorrow. This is our only home. You can choose today to make a world of difference.
Up until now, climate change has mostly been a story about challenges. Challenges to our communities, challenges to our economies, and challenges to the natural environment that sustains life on Earth. But with challenge comes opportunity. Opportunities to live and work more sustainably. Opportunities to transform economies. And opportunities to shift to a low-carbon, climate-resilient future. But here's something that might surprise you. Action on climate change is not some far-off event. There is an enormous groundswell of action already underway to fight climate change. It's happening right now, all over the world. That's why climate change is also a story about hope. There are thousands of examples of people taking action to address climate change. We wanted to take a closer look at some of these people. By sharing their stories, they show us that action on climate change is creating green jobs, inspiring entrepreneurship, and creating ripples that spread across communities and economies. Take India, for example. In the slums of Bangalore, an organization called Pollinate Energy is creating green entrepreneurs and bringing solar lighting to the city's most vulnerable populations.
At Pollinate Energy, we're a social business that improves the lives of India's urban poor. We do this by providing them with access to clean energy technologies. In India, there's around 390 million people who don't have access to electricity, and we found that a lot of these people were living in non-permanent urban settlements with about 5 people in each tent, the size of your dining room table, and a perfect candidate for something like a solar lantern.
70-80 ರೂಪಾಯಿಗೆ ಲೀಟ್ರ್ ಅದು ತಂದು ಉರಿಬೇಕು ಅದು ಈಗೇನು ಒಲೆ ಕತ್ತಲಾಗಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಹಾಕ್ಬೇಕು ಕತ್ತಲ್ದಾಗ ಕಣ್ಣು ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಬೆಳಕಾಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಉಳಿತಾಯನೇ ಮಕ್ಕಳೆಲ್ಲ ಬರಿತಾರೆ ಓದ್ತಾರೆ ಬೆಳಕಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಅಡುಗೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
Here in Bangalore, we have a network of micro-entrepreneurs, which we call pollinators. They're from the areas around the communities. They speak the local language. They spend time with the communities explaining the products so that they can understand them. And then they provide them with a payment plan so they can pay the system, which costs $30 off over 5 weeks. The way that they keep track of this is through a mobile phone app. On top of the fact that they have a job and they can earn money, a big benefit is the fact that they now have a community and a sense of belonging.
ಒಂಥರ ಈ ಸಮಾಜ ಸೇವೆ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಆಗೋಗಿದೆ ಈ ಕೆಲಸ ನನಗೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನನಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಖುಷಿಯಾಗಿದೆ, ಹ್ಯಾಪಿಯಾಗಿ. ಅವ್ರ ಸಂತೋಷದಿಂದ ನಾನು ತೃಪ್ತಿ ಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಅವ್ರು ಖುಷಿ ಪಟ್ಟರೆ ನಾನು ಖುಷಿ ಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ.
So in India, there's around 390 million people who don't have access to electricity, and the aim is over the next 10 years to try to get to the 53 cities in India with more than 1 million people.
ಮೊದಲೇನು ಬದುಕು ಕತ್ತಲ್ದಾಗ ಹಂಗೆ ನಾವು ಹಂಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೊಂಟೋಗಿವಿ. ಈಗ ಇದು ಬಂದ್ಮ್ಯಾಗ ಬೆಳಕಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ.
Taking action on climate change involves all aspects of our lives, especially how we use energy in our homes. Governments, too, have a role to play in residential energy use. In Mexico, the government has partnered with international development banks to encourage housing developers to build homes designed to decrease our carbon footprint before we even step out the door.
In the case of EcoCasa, we found, together with our partners, that the best way was to offer concessional bridge loans to developers that have a housing project that meets a certain level of emission reductions. The case of Mexico is particularly relevant because we can see these innovations happening in low-income housing.
Estamos participando con 1,000 casas, 750 en Héroes Capellanía y 250 en Héroes Monterrey. Nosotros nos hemos dado cuenta que no está peleada la sustentabilidad con el precio y con el dotar de una mejor vivienda a la población. Es una ecuación que se puede combinar muy bien. Desde hace poco más de 5 o 6 años hemos estado trabajando con calentadores solares, con reducción de agua, con reducción de calor en las casas, el aislamiento térmico, el tipo de acabados que le ponemos, las medidas adicionales en temas de sustentabilidad.
Decidimos comprar esta casa por cómo está hecha, ¿verdad? Y por la comodidad que nos ofrece. El ahorro energético es importante para nuestra economía, sobre todo. Pues ya no tenemos la necesidad de comprar algún aire acondicionado o otra cosa, ¿verdad? Para sentirnos más cómodos. Y ahora pagamos una cuarta parte de electricidad.
Nosotros sentimos que en el momento que esto se masifique y que podamos hacerlo de manera total para todas las viviendas que se desarrollan en nuestro país, definitivamente habrá menos emisiones y todo esto mejorará. Y esto se va a poder replicar. Estoy totalmente convencido.
Changing how an industry does business can be a daunting task, but EcoCasa shows it can be done. In the Philippines, the Sustainable Energy Finance Program is teaching banks the ins and outs of clean energy to encourage them to lend to sustainability projects.
Sustainable energy finance is all about teaching banks about energy efficiency and renewable energy.
There's still an apprehension of catering to these sustainable energy technologies, especially on energy efficiency and renewable energy.
Lending without the SEF is kind of difficult for us, for the banks in general, because we don't have the technical knowledge, technical expertise to handle these kind of situations. In the case of Star Mall here, it's a chiller project. We are not familiar with what kind of air conditioning units to use, what kind of power savings there will be. So that's where the invaluable support of the IFC people comes into play.
The project is completed and it's realizing close to $70,000 a month in energy savings. Excel Farm is a piggery where pig manure is used to generate electricity through biomass energy.
Most of the houses you see in this farm are climate controlled, as we call it. It's very electricity intensive operations where they have to consume a lot of energy to keep the houses cool. And with this project, what happens is you can utilize the waste to focus cold air on the pigs.
We're not actually teaching the banks to be engineers, but making them understand. By helping their clients improve their energy costs, this product will actually help them increase their loan portfolio and acquire new business as well.
The role of governments in taking action on climate change isn't just policy-oriented. They can provide incentives to businesses and citizens to act sustainably as well. In China, the Clean Development Mechanism Fund is a national climate fund that leverages private sector investment in clean energy projects and supports low-carbon growth across the country.
China's CDM Fund is National Climate Fund, mandated to support efforts to tackle climate change. It ensures that a large portion of revenues from international CDM transactions can be reused to support low-carbon development in China. The fund acts as seed money and bridges public and private partners. It will also help introduce innovative tools and spark great ideas.
Under the Chui Jiangsu project, we have issued 6 loans. The total number is 125 million RMB.
整个5000万贷款呢，解决了我们整个建设过程中的一些固定资产投资问题，是吧？有力的支持了这个项目，是吧？并且保证了它的顺利建成和投产。该项目呢是热电联产项目，啊，一边是呢用秸秆燃烧发电，另外一个呢多余的蒸汽呢就用于整个热力的保证供给。每年呢就消耗的秸秆和农村的废弃物是20万吨，二氧化碳的减排量是21万吨，啊，一个是解决了这个秸秆的焚烧问题，啊，保证了环境。第二个呢就是有力的促进了这个农民的额外的收入，啊，第三个来讲呢，就是在农民给我们企业之间的这个合作方面创造了新的模式。
俺这是这今个来是有60多户农民合到一块儿来用过来的。总体来说，每个季节呢都能够收入就是万把块钱。现在咱这农村呢，咱这生活水平越来越高，吃的也好了，穿的也好了，住的也好了，所以俺老百姓心里可高兴。
All these stories feature different people and different circumstances, but they all share the same goal: to build a low-carbon, climate-resilient future. They show that action on climate change is happening on the ground, in communities, large and small, all over the world. Most importantly, they show that there is momentum for change. Change for good.